The first ships appeared in the sky above Colony on a morning that started like any other. Farmers were already in their fields, children were heading to school, and the morning shift at the processing plant had just begun. Nobody expected the day to end in blood and fire. Minyu stood at the security station's window, coffee in hand, when the alarm started screaming. He dropped the cup and ran to the console. The screens showed 3 massive ships descending through the atmosphere. They were unlike anything in the human fleet database. Dark metal, covered in spikes and sharp angles, they looked like something designed to inspire fear. "Get everyone to the shelters," Minyu shouted into his communicator. "This is not a drill. I repeat, not a drill." The first blast hit the communications tower. The explosion sent debris flying across the colony's main street. People started running in every direction, screaming and trying to reach their families. Minyu grabbed his rifle and headed outside. Whatever was coming, the colony would not go down without a fight. The alien warriors descended on platforms of shimmering energy. They were massive creatures, easily 8 feet tall, covered in scales and natural armor. Their eyes glowed with a predatory excitement. They carried weapons, but many had holstered them. They wanted to hunt with their claws and teeth. Was in her workshop when the attack began. She heard the explosions and immediately understood what was happening. Her younger brother worked at the community center. She grabbed her tools and a heavy wrench, then ran toward the center of the colony. The streets were chaos. Buildings were burning. Bodies lay in the streets. The aliens were everywhere, hurting people like animals. One of the creatures spotted her and roared with what sounded like laughter. It started running toward her on all fours, incredibly fast despite its size. Didn't freeze. She threw the wrench as hard as she could. It struck the creature in the face, and while it barely slowed down, the impact made it angry. The alien forgot about sport and lunged for her throat. A gunshot rang out. The creature stumbled and fell. Minyu appeared from behind a burning vehicle, his rifle smoking. "Run," he shouted at. "Get to the community center. We're making our stand there." Ran. Behind her, she could hear Minyu firing repeatedly, buying time for anyone who could still escape. The community center was ahead, its reinforced walls offering the only real protection in the colony. People were streaming inside. Security officers were setting up defensive positions at every entrance. Brought his transport ship down hard in the colony's landing pad. The ship wasn't armed for combat, but he could still evacuate survivors. He opened the cargo ramp and started waving people aboard. Families rushed toward him, carrying whatever they could grab. Children crying, parents looking back at burning homes. Come on," urged them. "We don't have much time." One of the alien ships turned its attention to his transport, saw the weapons charging, and knew he had seconds to act. He sealed the cargo bay with 30 people inside and fired up the engines. The transport lifted off just as energy bolts tore through the landing pad where it had been sitting. At the community center, Minyu organized the defense. They had maybe 40 people who could fight, armed with hunting rifles, security weapons, and improvised clubs. Against them were hundreds of alien warriors who treated this as some kind of game. The creatures didn't just attack. They circled, they taunted, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Found helping elderly residents into the center's basement. Relief flooded through her. He was alive, but the relief lasted only seconds. A wall exploded inward and 3 of the aliens stepped through the rubble. They moved like cats, graceful and deadly. Minyu opened fire. Others joined him. The aliens' natural armor was tough, but concentrated fire could bring them down. 2 fell, but the third reached the defenders before they could reload. Its claws swept through the air. People screamed. Blood sprayed across the floor. Pushed an elderly woman out of the way and took the blow meant for her. The claws ripped through his chest. Scream was lost in the noise of battle. She grabbed a fallen rifle and fired at the creature until the weapon clicked empty. The alien finally fell, but was already gone. The battle lasted 6 hours. The defenders fought for every room, every hallway, every inch of the community center. Minyu led counterattacks when possible, retreating when necessary. Used her engineering knowledge to create traps and barriers, but they were losing. The aliens kept coming and the defenders kept falling. When the sun set, the aliens' commander finally appeared. He was even larger than the warriors, covered in scars that seemed to be badges of honor. He spoke in a harsh, growling language that the colony's computers barely translated. "You fought well for prey," the translation crackled. "Better than most, but the hunt is over. Surrender and some of you may survive to serve the Empire." Minyu stood at the center's entrance, blood covering his uniform, rifle empty but still held ready. Around him, maybe 20 defenders remained standing. "Go to hell," he said quietly. The alien commander laughed. It was a terrible sound. "Such spirit, you will make fine trophies." The final assault came fast and overwhelming. The aliens stopped playing and attacked with full force. The community center's walls crumbled under sustained bombardment. Minyu managed to activate the emergency beacon before the command station exploded. The signal shot into space, carrying a simple message: "Colony under attack by unknown hostiles. Send help." But help was weeks away, and the colony had minutes. When the warriors dragged the survivors out in chains, Minyu counted heads. Out of 15,000 colonists, maybe 300 were still alive. Was among them, her eyes empty with shock and grief. Transport had made it to orbit but was trapped there, unable to help, forced to watch the colony die. The commander stood among the ruins and activated his own communicator. "Mission complete. The humans are acceptable prey, weak but entertaining. They will provide good sport for the hunting preserves. Recommend expansion of operations to additional human colonies." The message traveled through space, reaching the Empire's high command. They approved the recommendation immediately. More ships were prepared, more hunting parties organized. They had found new prey and they intended to make the most of it. In orbit, recorded everything his ship's sensors could capture. Every ship design, every weapon signature, every tactical detail. If he survived to reach friendly space, humanity would know what killed colony. They would know who to blame. And in the chains below, Minyu caught eye. She was still alive, still thinking, still planning. The thought they had won, thought they had found easy prey. They had no idea that they had just made a terrible mistake. They had attacked humans, and humans never forget. The news from colony reached Earth 3 weeks after the attack. Transport had jumped through 5 systems, burning fuel reserves and pushing the engines past safe limits. When he finally arrived at Earth's orbital defense network, he was running on emergency power and pure determination. Admiral listened to his report in silence. The footage from played on the screens around the command center. Burning buildings, bodies in the streets, alien warriors treating human beings like animals. When the footage ended, the room was completely quiet. "How many colonies have reported attacks?" asked her staff. 7 confirmed, Admiral. 3 more have gone silent. We assume the worst. Walked to the window and looked down at Earth. The blue planet that humanity called home, now threatened by creatures that saw them as prey. She had served in the military for 30 years. She had fought pirates and separatists and criminal cartels. But this was different. This was extinction. "Contact the Galactic Council," she ordered. "Request immediate assistance under the mutual defense protocols." The response came back within hours. The Galactic Council had reviewed humanity's request. They had examined the evidence, and they had refused to help. The official statement was clear and brutal. Humans were classified as a prey species according to galactic biological standards. The Empire was within their rights to hunt prey species in unprotected space. Humanity could appeal the classification, but the process would take years. Years they did not have. Called an emergency session of the United Earth Defense Committee. Politicians, military leaders, scientists, and representatives from every colony world gathered in the meeting hall. The debate was fierce and desperate. "We should negotiate," one politician argued. "Perhaps we can offer them something else: trade agreements, territory, resources." "You want to negotiate with creatures that hunt our children for sport," another shouted back. "There is no negotiation with predators, only survival or death." Minyu sat in the back of the hall, still wearing his blood-stained uniform from. He had been brought back with the other survivors, freed when human forces raided a transport ship. The rescue had come too late for most. Only 43 people were still alive. When the politicians asked for his opinion, Minyu stood and spoke with a voice that had gone cold and hard. "They don't see us as people, they see us as animals. You cannot negotiate with someone who thinks you're just meat. We fight or we die. Those are the only choices." Was in a military research facility when the vote happened. They had given her a lab and unlimited resources. "Make weapons," they told her. "Make something that can kill these things." She worked day and night, barely sleeping, driven by grief and rage. The images of dying played in her mind over and over. The military brought her captured equipment. Weapons, armor, pieces of their ships, took them apart piece by piece, learning how they worked. The technology was advanced but not overwhelming. They relied on their physical strength and natural advantages. Their tactics were direct and brutal. They fought like predators, confident in their superiority. That was their weakness. Started designing weapons that targeted those weaknesses. High-frequency sonic weapons that disrupted sensory organs. Electromagnetic pulse grenades that fried their armor's power systems. Chemical compounds that attacked their scaled skin. She called her project the Equalizer Protocol. The Defense Committee vote was close, but in the end they chose war. Earth would not surrender. Earth would not negotiate. Earth would show the galaxy what happened when you hunted the wrong species. Volunteered for the first counterattack before the ink was dry on the authorization. He was tired of running, tired of watching people die while he escaped. Admiral approved his transfer to combat flight operations immediately. They needed pilots with real combat experience and had seen more of the enemy than almost anyone alive. The target was a supply station in the 442 system. Intelligence reports said it was lightly defended, used mainly for refueling hunting parties. Minyu led the ground team. 30 soldiers, all volunteers, all survivors of attacks. They knew what they were fighting for. The attack happened at night local time. Human ships came in dark and silent, engines running cold. The sensors were designed to detect fleeing prey, not approaching predators. By the time they realized what was happening, Minyu's team was already boarding the station. The fighting was close and vicious. The warriors were surprised but not helpless. They still had claws and teeth and generations of hunting experience. But Minyu's team had something they did not expect: absolute fury. These were not scared colonists defending their homes. These were soldiers who had watched their families die. They fought with a cold, calculated rage that shocked the aliens. Weapons proved their worth. The sonic grenades sent warriors stumbling, their sensitive hearing overwhelmed. The EMP charges disabled their armor, leaving them vulnerable to conventional weapons. The chemical smoke burned their eyes and lungs. For the first time, they felt what it was like to be hunted. Fighter Wing provided cover, engaging 3 interceptors that tried to respond. The alien ships were fast and heavily armed, but their pilots had never fought an enemy that didn't run. Used every dirty trick he knew, things he had learned flying cargo through pirate space. He baited them into asteroid fields, lured them into crossfires, hit them from angles they never expected. One by one, the fighters went down. The supply station was captured in 6 hours. 60 warriors dead, another 20 captured. Minyu's team lost 8 soldiers, but they had won. It was humanity's first real victory in the war. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship when the news came through. The crew erupted in cheers. For weeks, they had heard nothing but reports of losses and retreats. Now, finally, they had hit back. But did not celebrate. She watched the tactical displays and thought about the future. The supply station was a small target, barely worth mentioning in the scope of the Empire. They had hurt the enemy, yes, but they had also shown their hand. The now knew that humans could fight back. The question was, what would they do about it? The answer came 2 days later. A fleet, 5 times larger than anything seen before, entered human space. They were not here to hunt anymore. They were here to exterminate. Minyu received his new orders while still aboard the captured station. He was to take his team and train more soldiers. The military needed guerrilla fighters, special operations teams that could strike fast and disappear, people who could teach others to be hunters instead of prey. Got new orders too. She was promoted to head of weapons development and given every resource she requested. Her next project was already a new class of stealth fighter that could hide from sensors completely. She called them Wraith Class, after the ghosts that haunted her dreams. Looked at his flight roster and saw 100 new names. Fresh pilots, barely trained, looking at him for guidance. He remembered the civilians he couldn't save at. He remembered watching the colony burn from orbit while he fled. "Listen up," he told his new squadron. "They think we're prey. They're about to learn they're wrong." The hunting preserve on Theta 7 covered an entire continent. Thousands of square kilometers of forests, plains, and mountains where the aliens brought their captured prey. Humans were scattered across the landscape, given basic supplies, and told to run. Then the hunting parties were released. Minyu's strike team inserted during a storm, their drop pods screaming through the atmosphere in the middle of lightning and wind. The sensors missed them completely, assuming the readings were just atmospheric interference. By the time the pods hit ground, Minyu and his 20 operators were deep in the forest, invisible in the darkness. They had been training for this mission for months. Every member of the team was a survivor of attacks. They knew the enemy intimately. They knew how the aliens thought, how they hunted, how they could be beaten. But most importantly, they knew what was at stake. The preserve held over 2,000 human prisoners. Intelligence reports said a major hunt was scheduled in 3 days. They were planning to release 50 hunting parties simultaneously for their emperor's entertainment. It would be a massacre, unless Minyu's team could stop it. The team moved through the forest like ghosts. They used no lights, made no sound, left no trail. They were expecting prey that ran and hid and panicked. They were not expecting trained soldiers who had learned to be predators themselves. The first hunting party died without ever knowing humans were near. Minyu's team set up ambush positions along a game trail, using the terrain and darkness to their advantage. When the warriors came through, laughing and boasting about their upcoming kills, shaped charges detonated beneath them. The explosion was over in seconds. 4 warriors dead, their weapons and equipment salvaged. "One down," Minyu said into his radio. 16 more to go before the alarm goes up. In orbit above the planet, sat in the cockpit of his Wraith-class fighter. The new stealth ships were everything had promised. They were invisible to sensors, fast enough to outrun interceptors, and armed with weapons designed specifically to kill alien vessels. His squadron of 20 fighters waited in formation, ready to provide support when Minyu called for extraction. "Ghost leader to ground team," transmitted on the encrypted channel. "We have eyes on your position. Patrol ships are maintaining standard orbit. They suspect nothing." "Copy that, Ghost leader," Minyu responded. "Beginning Phase 2. Phase 2 was the risky part. Minyu's team had to reach the prison compounds and organize the captives. They needed the prisoners ready to move when extraction came. But the compounds were guarded by dozens of warriors and automated defense systems. Had provided solutions for both problems. Her latest invention was a virus that could infiltrate computer systems. It was loaded onto a data spike that just needed to be plugged into any terminal connected to the preserve's network. The virus would spread through the entire system, disabling alarms, unlocking doors, and feeding false data to the guards. Getting to a terminal meant getting inside a guard tower. Minyu chose the North Tower, the one closest to the largest prison compound. Two of his operators and volunteered for the infiltration. They were the best climbers on the team and had experience with enemy installations. The tower was 40 meters tall, built from the same dark metal as ships. Two guards stood watch at the top, scanning the forest with enhanced optics. They were looking outward, watching for escaping prey. They never thought to look down at the base of their own tower. And climbed in complete silence, using magnetic grips that had designed. The climb took 30 minutes of painfully slow progress. One slip, one sound, and the alarm would go up. But they reached the top without incident. The guards died quietly, knives across their throats before they could make a sound. Dragged the bodies out of sight while accessed the terminal. She plugged in the data spike and watched virus go to work. The screen flickered, lines of code scrolling faster than human eyes could follow. Virus is active, reported. We have network access, disabling alarms now. Across the preserve, prison compound gates unlocked. Defense turrets went into diagnostic mode. Guard stations received false reports of escaped prisoners in the wrong direction. The security system thought everything was fine while it fell apart from the inside. Minyu led the main team into the largest compound. They found 300 humans in various states of health and despair. Some had been prisoners for months, traumatized and broken. Others were more recent captives, still angry and defiant. All of them stared in disbelief when human soldiers appeared in the darkness. "We're here to get you out," Minyu told them. "But you have to move fast and stay quiet. Can you do that?" A woman stepped forward. Her clothes were torn, her face bruised, but her eyes were clear and determined. "We'll follow you through hell itself if it means getting off this planet." "Good," Minyu said, "because hell is exactly where we're going." The extraction had to happen before dawn. That gave them 3 hours to gather all the prisoners, move them to the landing zone, and get off-planet before they realized what was happening. 3 hours to save 2,000 people from a world designed to kill them. The team split into groups, each responsible for a different compound. They moved fast, using the virus-compromised security systems to stay ahead of patrols. The prisoners followed orders well, years of captivity having taught them to move silently when predators were near. But the plan started to fall apart at the eastern compound. A warrior, returning early from patrol, discovered the open gates and dead guards. He roared an alarm that echoed across the preserve. Within seconds, every hunting party on the planet knew something was wrong. "Contact," one of Minyu's teams reported. "Multiple hostiles converging on our position." "All teams switch to combat mode," Minyu ordered. "Get the prisoners to the landing zone. We'll hold them off." The fighting erupted across the preserve. Human soldiers with weapons against warriors in full battle rage. The aliens were stronger, faster, tougher, but the humans had surprise, superior tactics, and absolute desperation. His team ambushed a hunting party in a narrow canyon, using explosives to trigger a rockslide that buried half the warriors. His team lured another group into a clearing and called down fire from fighters, the Wraith-class ships screaming out of the sky to strafe the confused aliens. Minyu personally led the rear guard, keeping the main force away from the prisoners streaming toward the landing zone. His team fought and retreated, using every dirty trick and unconventional tactic they knew. They didn't try to win. They just had to survive long enough. The transport ships came down through the atmosphere like falling stars. Heavy assault transports designed to carry hundreds of passengers in armored hulls. The prisoners ran for the ships, decades of captivity forgotten in the desperate rush for freedom. Fighters provided cover, engaging interceptors that scrambled to stop the evacuation. The space battle was short and brutal. The Wraith-class ships were outnumbered but not outmatched. They used stealth and speed, hitting the enemy from unexpected angles, vanishing before return fire could lock on. "Last transport loaded," the flight commander reported. "Ground team, you have 30 seconds." Minu's team sprinted for the final ship, firing behind them as they ran. The landing ramp was already closing. Dove through the gap with seconds to spare. Followed. Minu came last, turning to fire one final burst before the ramp sealed shut. The transport lurched into the air, engines screaming at full power. Fire hammered the shields, but the ship's armor held. They climbed through the atmosphere, leaving the hunting preserve behind. In the cargo bay, 2,000 freed prisoners sat in shocked silence, unable to believe they were actually escaping. The woman who had volunteered to lead found Minu in the crowd. "Thank you," she said simply. Minu looked at the freed prisoners, at his team, at the price they had paid. 3 of his operators hadn't made it to the extraction, but 2,000 people would live because of this mission. "Thank humanity," he said. "We're done being prey." Admiral watched the battle reports coming in from across human space. The Theta 7 rescue was just one of 20 operations happening simultaneously. Human forces were hitting installations everywhere, disrupting their operations, freeing prisoners, and most importantly, showing the galaxy that humanity could fight back. The Empire was beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. These humans were not like other prey species. They did not break easily, they did not surrender, and they definitely did not forget. The High Command met in their war chamber on the 12 of the Empire's most powerful warriors gathered around a table made from the bones of their ancestors' enemies. The news from the frontier was alarming. Human forces had destroyed 47 military installations in the last month. Thousands of warriors were dead. The hunting preserves were liberated, their prisoners freed or armed. Most disturbing of all, the humans had captured Commander alive. "This is impossible," snarled High Commander, the Empire's supreme military leader. "They are prey. Prey does not hunt. Prey does not win battles, yet somehow these soft-skinned weaklings are destroying our forces." The intelligence officer, a smaller covered in silver scales, projected tactical displays into the air. "The humans are using guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, weapons designed specifically to counter our advantages. They have studied us, learned our weaknesses, and are exploiting them systematically." "Then we will adapt," growled. "Send the entire Fourth Fleet to human space. No more hunting parties, no more sport. This is now a war of extermination." The Fourth Fleet was the pride of the military. 80 warships, thousands of warriors, enough firepower to reduce planets to ash. It would take the fleet 3 weeks to reach human space. The Empire expected total victory within a month after arrival. They did not know that Admiral was planning something that would change the war forever. Worked around the clock in her laboratory, surrounded by screens and half-assembled weapons. Her team of engineers had grown from just her to over 200 scientists and technicians. Together, they were creating weapons that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The latest project was her most ambitious, the Apex Predator missile. It was designed to target biological signatures specifically. The warhead contained a genetic weapon that would only affect creatures with DNA. It was controversial, brutal, and exactly what humanity needed to survive. "Are you sure about this?" her assistant asked, looking at the weapon schematics with obvious concern. "This is not just killing in combat, this is targeting their biology." Thought about dying in her arms. She thought about the thousands of humans hunted for sport. She thought about children running through forests while alien warriors laughed and gave chase. "They made the rules," she said coldly. "We are just playing by them." Minu received new orders while training guerrilla fighters at the tactical school on Mars. He was being promoted to colonel and given command of a special forces regiment. Their mission: assault Prime's orbital defenses and prepare the way for a full-scale invasion. It was an impossible mission. Prime was the most heavily defended planet in the Empire. Dozens of orbital platforms, thousands of fighters, automated defense systems that could track and destroy anything that approached. Military analysts predicted that attacking Prime would cost humanity half its fleet. But Admiral had a plan that might just work. Squadron, now expanded to 50 Wraith-class fighters, would lead the assault. Their stealth capabilities meant they could penetrate the orbital defenses without being detected. Once inside the defense perimeter, they would upload another of its computer viruses, one designed to shut down the entire defense network for exactly 10 minutes. 10 minutes for Menu's forces to storm the orbital platforms. 10 minutes for the human fleet to jump into the system. 10 minutes to either win the war or lose everything. The mission launched from a dozen staging points simultaneously. Human ships jumped through hyperspace, converging on Prime from multiple directions. They detected the incoming fleet and scrambled their defenses, confident in their ability to destroy the attackers. They never saw the Wraith fighters coming. Led his squadron through the orbital defenses like threading a needle. The stealth ships slipped past sensor grids, avoided patrol routes, and infiltrated the defense network's central hub. It was a space station the size of a small city, bristling with weapons and shielded by enough armor to shrug off battleship fire. But the shields had to lower briefly when fighters launched. That gave a 3-second window to slip inside. He made it through with half a second to spare. His wingman, a pilot named, was not as lucky. The shields caught his fighter's tail section and the ship exploded in a brief flash of light. Didn't have time to mourn. He had a job to do. The virus upload took 2 minutes. His fighter sat in a maintenance bay, pretending to be a ship while his computer hacked into the station's network. Alarms started going off. Warriors poured into the bay, weapons ready. Upload at 90%. His computer announced calmly while energy bolts hammered his shields. Returned fire, his fighter's guns tearing through the warriors and equipment around him. His shields were failing. His engines were overheating, but the upload continued. Upload complete. Punched the throttle and his fighter screamed out of the bay, shields collapsing just as he cleared the station. Behind him, every defense platform in orbit went dark. Weapons powered down. Shields dropped. Targeting systems froze. The impregnable fortress around Prime was suddenly completely defenseless. All units, this is Ghost Leader, transmitted. The door is open. I repeat, the door is open. Menu's assault force came in hard and fast. Drop ships and boarding pods launched from the approaching human fleet, targeting the now helpless orbital platforms. The warriors aboard the stations fought desperately, but without their automated defenses, they were overwhelmed. Menu led his regiment through the chaos of ship-to-ship combat. They moved through corridors designed for creatures 8 feet tall, fighting enemies that could tear humans apart with their bare hands. But Menu's troops had weapons and months of training. They used tactics they had never encountered, strategies that would have been considered dishonorable in traditional warfare. They used explosives to seal corridors and trap warriors. They vented atmosphere to suffocate defenders. They hacked life support systems and flooded sections with chemical weapons. They fought dirty, brutal, and effective. On the flagship of the human fleet, Admiral watched the battle unfold. The 10-minute window was closing. In 3 minutes, the defense network would reboot. But by then, Menu's forces had captured enough platforms to control the orbital space. All ships advanced to bombardment positions, ordered. Prepare to deploy the Apex Predator missiles. On Prime below, High Commander watched his orbital defenses fall with growing horror. This was impossible. The humans had penetrated their strongest defenses. They had fought warriors who should have torn them apart. They had won battles they should have lost. For the first time in his long military career, felt something the rarely experienced: fear. "Contact the human fleet," he ordered his communications officer. "Offer terms of surrender." But Admiral had not come to accept surrender. She had come to deliver a message. For every human hunted, her transmission broadcast across all channels. For every child who ran in terror, for every family torn apart for your sport, you will pay. We do not accept your surrender. We accept only your defeat. The Apex Predator missiles launched from the human fleet. They streaked through the atmosphere, their targeting systems locked onto biological signatures. The genetic weapons spread across the planet's surface, seeking their victims. But had built in one mercy. The weapon only affected warriors, those with the genetic markers of the military caste. Civilians, offspring, and non-combatants were spared. Humanity was not here for genocide. They were here for justice. Watch from his cell aboard a human warship as his defenses crumbled. The mighty empire which had dominated the galaxy for 1,000 years was falling to creatures they had considered prey. The irony was almost funny. Almost. "How?" he asked Minyu, who came to observe the former commander's reaction. "How did you defeat us?" Minyu looked at the alien who had destroyed Colony, who had laughed while human families died. "You thought being a predator made you superior," he said quietly. "You never understood that humans are predators too. We just chose not to be, most of the time. You made us remember what we really are." The war ended 3 weeks after the fall of Prime. The military, its leadership dead or captured, its under human control, had no choice but to surrender. The terms were delivered by Admiral herself, standing in what used to be the throne room. The chamber was massive, designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Stone pillars carved to look like predator beasts rose to a ceiling lost in shadow. The throne itself was made from the skulls of 100 different species, arranged in a monument to conquest. Stood before it, looking at the emperor who sat defeated and broken. "You will release all prisoners immediately," stated, her voice echoing in the chamber. "You will provide full reparations to every species you have hunted. You will submit to war crimes tribunals, and you will accept human oversight of your military for the next 50 years. The emperor, an ancient covered in scars from a lifetime of hunts, looked at the small human who had destroyed his empire. "We were once prey ourselves," he said quietly. "Millions of years ago, before we evolved, before we became apex predators, we swore we would never be prey again. We conquered the galaxy to ensure it. And now you are prey once more," said without sympathy. "Perhaps you will learn the lesson better this time." Minyu walked through the rebuilt streets of Colony. The reconstruction had taken a year, but the settlement was alive again. New buildings stood where old ones had burned. Children played in parks that had been battlefields. Life continued because that was what life did. He stopped at a memorial in the town square, a simple stone wall with 15,000 names carved into it, every person who died in the attack. Minyu ran his fingers over the letters, finding his name among the others. So much loss, so much death, all because the thought humans were prey. "I thought I would find you here," a voice said behind him. Approached, looking more tired than Minyu had ever seen her. The war was over, but she had not stopped working. There were always more weapons to design, more defenses to build, more preparations to make. Just because one enemy had fallen did not mean others would not come. "I come here every week," Minyu admitted, "to remember why we fought." "And why we won?" asked. "No," Minyu said, "why we can never let this happen again." They stood together in silence, two survivors honoring the dead. The colony went on around them, people living their lives, unaware or uncaring of the two soldiers who had helped save them all. Retired from active service with full honors. He had flown over 300 combat missions, destroyed 47 enemy ships, and earned every medal the military could give him. but all he wanted was to forget the war and learn to live in peace again. He opened a flight school on Europa, teaching civilian pilots the basics of navigation and safety. His students never knew that their instructor was the legendary ghost leader who had broken Prime's defenses. He preferred it that way. The war was over. Time to move on. But sometimes, late at night, he would take a shuttle up above the clouds and just fly. Up there, alone in the silence of space, he would remember and all the other pilots who never came home. He would remember the fear, the adrenaline, the desperate fights where death was one mistake away. And he would remember that they won. The Galactic Council met to discuss humanity's status. The debate was intense. Some species argued that humans should be recognized as full members immediately. Others worried about giving too much power to a species that had just destroyed the Empire in less than 2 years. In the end, they voted to reclassify humanity as an emergent apex species, with full voting rights and military protection under galactic law. More importantly, they acknowledged that humanity had the right to defend itself and others from predation. The message was clear: humans were no longer prey. Anyone who tried to hunt them would face consequences. But stood before the council and delivered a warning of her own. "We did not want this war," she said, her voice carrying to every representative in the chamber. "We wanted to live in peace, to raise our families, to explore the galaxy as friends and neighbors, but you classified us as prey. You refused to help when we were attacked. You left us to die." The council representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "We survived," continued. "We adapted, we fought back, and we won. But do not mistake our victory for enjoyment of war. We are not like we do not hunt for sport. We fight only when we must. But know this, if you threaten humanity again, if you classify any species as prey without protection, if you allow this kind of horror to continue, we will stand against you." The silence that followed was absolute. "We are done being victims, finished, and we will not allow others to be victims either." Minyu founded the Memorial Corps using his military pension and donations from across human space. It was a volunteer defense force dedicated to protecting vulnerable species throughout the galaxy. Former soldiers, retired pilots, civilian volunteers, anyone who wanted to make sure what happened to never happened again. The Corps operated in gray areas of galactic law, going places the official military could not, helping species that had no one else. They were not popular with governments, but they were beloved by the people they saved. Remained in a human prison, studying recordings of the war. He had lived his entire life believing that predators were superior to prey. Now he knew differently. The humans had been prey, yes, but they had also been predators who chose not to hunt. That choice made them more dangerous than they could have imagined. He watched footage of Minyu leading assaults, designing weapons, flying through impossible situations. He saw humans fighting with a desperation and determination that no warrior could match, because they fought for honor and glory. The humans fought for survival and revenge. There was no competition. "What happens to me now?" asked his human guards one day. "You will stand trial," they told him. "You will answer for your crimes. And then, if you are very lucky, you will spend the rest of your life in a cell, thinking about the people you killed." Nodded slowly. It was more mercy than they had shown their prey. 3 years after the war ended, returned to colony for a memorial ceremony. The entire settlement gathered in the rebuilt square, thousands of people honoring those who died and those who survived. Minyu was there, wearing his old uniform. Came too, traveling from Europa just for the event. The three of them stood before the memorial wall, the last survivors of that terrible day when they came. They were different now, changed by war and loss, but they were still human, still capable of hope. "Do you think it was worth it?" asked quietly. "Everything we did, everyone we killed, the things we became." Minyu looked at the colony around them, alive and thriving. "We survived. Our species survived. Yes, it was worth it." But at what cost? Wondered. We created weapons of genocide. We learned to be as brutal as our enemies. We became predators. No, Minyu said firmly. We became protectors. There is a difference. The ceremony began. Names were read aloud, all 15,000 of them. The crowd stood in silence, remembering. Whence name was called, felt tears on her face for the first time in years. She had been so focused on revenge, on victory, on making the pay. Now, with the war over, she could finally grieve. Admiral gave a speech about sacrifice and survival, about the price of freedom and the cost of peace, about remembering the past while building the future. Her words were powerful, but Minyu barely heard them. He was thinking about all the soldiers who followed him into battle, the ones who came home and the ones who did not. As the sun set over Colony, human ships passed overhead, patrolling the frontier. The galaxy was safer now. They were broken. Other predator species had learned to leave humanity alone, and the prey species that once had no protection now had powerful allies. The humans had learned a terrible lesson, that sometimes, to survive, you must become what you fear most. But they had also learned something else, that power comes with responsibility, that protecting the weak is more important than dominating the strong, that mercy and strength can exist together. The galaxy had called them prey. The galaxy had been wrong. Humans were not prey. They were not predators either, not in the way they understood. Humans were something different, something the galaxy had never seen before. They were survivors who refused to let others suffer as they had suffered. They were warriors who fought not for glory but for protection. They were the species that answered the question, what happens when prey decides to bite back? The answer was written in the ruins of the Empire, in the freed prisoners, in the protected colonies, in the new laws passed by the Galactic Council. The answer was clear for anyone who cared to look. When galactic predators hunted humans, they were unprepared for a retaliation that would reshape the galaxy forever.